Okay, let's go ahead and call to order the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Executive Committee meeting of June 28th, 2024 at 1:01 p.m. Let's go ahead and have the roll call.
Yes, thank you. Chair Klein?
Present.
Vice Chair Makachek?
Present.
Director Meadows? Here. Director Walia?
Here.
Thank you. I'll note that Director Martinez-Beltran and Director Tyson are absent, but we do have a quorum of our committee.
Thank you. Next is public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. This is for members of the public to speak on something that's not on our agenda today. There's no one in the room. Is there anyone online that wishes to speak?
No, Chair.
Okay, I will close public comment. Before we go to our consent calendar, I just want to say we'll be adjusting the agenda slightly. We'll be taking item 5 before item 4 today. Next is our consent calendar. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on a consent calendar item remotely?
No.
No? Are there any changes or comments on consent calendar items, Vice Chair?
No, but I was going to make a motion if there's no other comments.
Go right ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the May 24th, 2024 Executive Committee meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. And since everyone's in the room, we can do this by oral vote. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Let's move to our next item. Item number 1, our CEO report.
Okay, just to be clear, so item number 2 is a CEO report, right?
Sorry.
And then the item that's getting moved up is item 4 in front of item 3. So we'll talk about the lease, the office space, right after the workforce discussion, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
We have a lot of things on the agenda today, so I'm going to make my comments brief. Just a few things to update you on. First of all, I'm very excited to report that the California Supreme Court has removed the ballot initiative that was put on by the California Business Roundtable measure. This was the one that was going to require the 2/3 vote to change any rates, fees, anything else. So that has been removed, and we're hopeful that it's not going to show up again. Also wanted to let you know that we're awaiting a proposed decision for the California Public Utility Commission that would essentially deem the Department of Water Resources to be the central procurement entity to try to procure offshore wind. And that offshore wind procurement would be on behalf of all CPUC jurisdictional load serving entities, including SVCE. And so this was something that was very controversial that is the formation of the central procurement entity, but the state ultimately put the CPE in place. And so we're following that proceeding pretty carefully and seeing how it's going to impact us. And then the last thing to update you, one more thing, we have Victory Pass, which was the solar plus storage project that came online back in early April. We'll have a ribbon cutting for that project in October, and so we'll be sending out a notice to the board to see if somebody wants to attend and cut the actual ribbon. So hopefully our chair can attend and others who want to be there as well. And then last thing, just to let you know, I will be off next week. So at the end of this, I think this weekend will mark my 90th day as your CEO. And so I'm actually taking next week off, and Amrit will be in charge, should you have any questions. Amrit and Andrea, of course, is always in charge. So go to Andrea. All right, that concludes my CEO update.
Thank you. Any comments, questions from the directors?
Thanks, Chair Klein. Monica, congratulations on 90 days. That's fabulous. Went very fast and very smoothly. It's just great. Clarifying question about the CPUC regarding the offshore wind thing. Just very high level, what are we expecting and what kind of impacts on us?
Well, it's a good thing we have Ben on the call too, because Ben could probably answer some more specifics. But the central procurement entity, again, that was established was to help facilitate some of these really hard to build projects, including offshore wind. And while we weren't supportive of a CPE in general, we were definitely supportive of having if there was a CPE in place, having them do these types of big projects that are really hard for any one load serving entity to build on our own. And so I think that the intent is to try to, if we could do it and do it at scale, that doing it kind of jointly through the CPE would be the best way to do it. But of course, there's lots of potential, issues with building offshore wind. There's still lots of permitting issues, lots of risks, lots of cost. We expect it to be a very expensive resource. And if they are able to get it built, then most likely it'll, be something that's non-bypassable. That means all ratepayers under CPUC jurisdiction would be subject to the cost. I don't know if you want to add anything else, Benna. I mean, I don't think they have any particular projects in mind right now, but.
Yeah, and I just got a note from Maren with an update too, that this is still going through the CPUC process, so we don't know exactly how much offshore wind there might be. There's just a lot of conversations that are happening right now between the CPUC, LSCs, and developers. If we had to guess, we'd say likely DWR will be asked to seek some offers for 3 to 5 gigawatts. But no, there's no particular projects in mind that we know of at this moment. So this is a developing issue. We're very happy to continue to keep the board updated as things progress.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Any other comments? Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item?
No hands raised, Chair.
Thank you, and again, congratulations, Monica.
Thank you.
Enjoy the vacation. Hopefully it's a nice break and well deserved. Thank you.
It's a good time to take a break too, because most people, most people are out.
Absolutely. And just to double check, so you said item 4 before 3 or 3 or?
Yeah, so
I think your numbers are.
Let's just double, sorry, I just wanted to
So
reconfirm.
we'll do the workforce strategy update from Benna, sorry, Maren. And then we'll go to Lisa and Amrit. We'll talk about
The workforce is normal.
Karen and Amrit.
Karen and Amrit will talk about who did I say? Lisa.
So it is 5
Talk
before.
about the office
It is
lease
5, yeah.
agreement, and then we'll have us program. Yeah, then the tariff on bill financing, and then the programs.
So that's what you told me, Andrea.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
What she told you.
Yes, she really runs this meeting, we all know that. Okay. Okay, so we'll move to item number 3, workforce strategy update and power purchase agreement project selection standards.
Great. Good afternoon, Executive Committee. Benna Chang, Director of Government and Legislative Affairs. I apologize for not being there with you in person today. Actually at CAISO with Cal CCA for an in-person meeting. So stepping out just to take this conversation. And I will mention that this has been much of a group effort. So I've been working very closely with Zoe and Eric on the DPP team, as well as Eric and Britta from Pro and Mike, our general counsel on this. So although you see me talking today, this has really been a larger group effort at SVCE. Next slide, please. So you might remember that we came to the executive committee last year to outline a workforce strategy. And we talked then about how there's a huge spectrum of jobs in the energy ecosystem, everything from engineers to linemen to planners. But the executive committee then gave us direction that we should support energy jobs overall through activities like state advocacy, but that we should really focus on local building and transportation electrification jobs. And we're doing that through a couple of main strategies. We're trying to spur market demand, and then also understanding and supporting the local landscape of workforce stakeholders. Next slide, please. So in meetings that we have been having with a lot of the local and regional stakeholders on workforce, for example, NovaWorks and the unions, one of the common themes that we've been hearing is that supporting demand is really critical. It's important that there are jobs waiting for trainees as they graduate. And SVCE is continuing to lean in pretty heavily here. So for example, on the power supply side, we've signed 21 power purchase agreements, which have generated more than 2,700 construction jobs. On the program side, we're working on a combination of policies like REACH codes and existing building policies, as well as programs like our home rebates and electric advisor. Really, all these are crafted to help support demand and make sure that demand for building electrification jobs are out there. As we develop these programs, we're also soliciting stakeholder feedback. So this includes from workforce organizations. And through this process, we're really seeking opportunities to help support the local workforce as we design and implement these programs. For example, we have elected to require prevailing wage for our new single-family turnkey program. And this was largely based on the stakeholder feedback that we received. Finally, we continue to provide opportunities for online contractor training on electrification, and then we're continuing our efforts to meet with a broad network of workforce organizations, and Eric's been doing a lot of work in participating in regional coalitions on this issue too. Next slide. So as part of our update today, we also wanted to talk about a proposed power purchase agreement project selection standard. So as we select PPAs, you know that we're really looking to maximize the regulatory market value while we consider a variety of factors, including mandates, reliability, risk mitigation. We're trying to balance a number of objectives, including workforce development. So on this one, our PPAs require prevailing wage, and then we also support skilled and trained workforce and apprentices. And we have a preference for project labor agreements as a way to demonstrate compliance with this area. On technology, we are seeking to add a diversity of project types into our portfolio for really a portfolio management and risk management perspective. Same for location. Locational diversity is really important for our portfolio. We have a preference for projects within our service territory and those that are interconnected and with deliverability into CAISO. And then finally, on environmental stewardship, all else being equal, we have a preference for projects that avoid environmentally sensitive areas or where developers have an enforceable agreement with mitigation measures. Next slide. So today we're really here to provide an update on our strategy. Would love to take any feedback that you have on our activities and strategy to date. And then we're also asking the executive committee to recommend that the board direct staff to adopt the power purchase agreement project selection standard. With that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Vice Chair?
Yeah, if you could go back to the slide on the power purchase agreement, please. And so the first one is essentially prevailing wage. And I'm curious as to what the benefits to SVCE are of this. I get the technology diversification. That's, you don't want to have all of one type. In terms of the location, I think that's driven by the word interconnected. Projects, it's not like this screening is going to do something because as I understand it, we don't have enough projects to evaluate.
Well,
there's more demand than there is supply of clean energy.
When we issue solicitations, we always get projects to evaluate. Whether they come to fruition or not is a whole other thing, but we will get a bunch of contracts to evaluate, and we have to have standards in order to evaluate one versus the other, right? So ultimately, if we have 20 that come through, maybe we narrow it down to 2 that we actually negotiate with, right? And then maybe one of them gets developed or both of them gets developed, but we do get offers. We get several offers through our solicitations. And so this is about when we get those offers, what kind of criteria should we use to help us make that selection and bring those projects just rank them and then select which ones we want to negotiate with.
Oh, okay. So, and then I understand. And then environmental stewardship, like, are we putting a layer on top of a layer here? Like, if you go, and the ribbon cuttings that I've gone to, the developers have all spoken about the hoops that they have to jump through to meet the regulations, all of the different regulations, especially environmental. And, you know, are we a layer on top of a layer there, or is this more of a checklist and tick, 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 you meet our requirements? Or is it a true screening?
Do you want me to answer, Bennett, or do you want to answer?
Sure, you can go ahead, yeah.
It's not so much that we are yes or no if they meet certain criteria. It's more like, how do they measure one against the other? Like, first we'll do the big thing that we care about is whether or not they meet our requirements for compliance mandates. Assuming that that's done, then we have to look at other attributes that these projects have. And all things being equal, if we have one project that is friendlier or is being developed in an area that doesn't have environmental concerns, like say Joshua tree in the area, or an endangered species of some sort, then we would, all things being equal, we would pick the project that has less damage to that local environment. So it's not a screening, but rather we will assess points based on these attributes to say, okay, this project fares well here, but fares better over here. So it's not a
So there's a scoring rubric.
Exactly. And then to your earlier question about what benefit do we get from including these workforce development things, including prevailing wage or project labor agreement, most of our contracts, with the exception of a couple, have these requirements already in the contract. So we've been doing this since day one. Now with the Inflation Reduction Act, you cannot get the full benefit from the investment or production tax credit if you don't have a project labor agreement.
Okay, you just underscored the value right there.
Yeah. So a lot of this is kind of just reiterating what we already do, but putting it in the form of a standard and having the board see it, because we have never shared this with the board. We just bring projects to you, but we never talked about the different things that we looked at when we brought one project versus another to you.
Follow-on question?
Absolutely.
I always ask the same question. What are the other CCAs doing with respect to this? Are we the first ones to come out with this, or is it all happening at the same time, or are we following?
Yeah, so there are other CCAs with different versions of project selection standards or criteria. For example, 3CE has one, AVA has one. We know the city of San Jose is considering one as well. So there are several, Peninsula Clean Energy as well has one. So there's several CCAs that have done versions of this. So yeah, there's some examples out there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Chair?
Just,
Director Davis.
yeah. Just quick, so we've essentially been doing this already. You're just making it explicit, if I understood.
Exactly.
Right, okay. And in what circumstances, usually prevailing wage is an issue for cities anyway. Maybe it's not for this type of project, but in what circumstances would we waive a standard? So if none of them were prevailing wage, or maybe that's not realistic in this environment, but in city environments, every time you say prevailing wage, people hide under a table. So, so how do you, if you want to make an exception to a standard, who decides that? Do you decide that? Does the board see it? I shouldn't focus on prevailing wage, but if you want to choose one and it doesn't meet all these standards, you just document it, or what's the ability to not meet the standard?
Yeah. So Ben, do you want me to answer, or do you want to answer?
Sure, I can help. Go ahead.
All right, so you're right, prevailing wage, if you build a project in California, is required by law. So you can't really skirt that, right? And again, if you want to get the full benefits of these investment tax credits and production tax credits, which are huge dollars.
Yeah.
So it's very unlikely that any developer will go into a project today without a PLA. So that's not our responsibility, but the developer has to demonstrate that they're able to get that. We have had contracts that weren't built in California, that were built in Nevada, that did not have these same criteria in it because the state of Nevada has different requirements or different programs that provide different incentives for projects that are built with labor. And so they don't call it the same thing. They don't have California prevailing wage in there. And so those are the exceptions that we have to our contracts. And so when we bring these to the board, we don't usually call out what the specific contract provisions are. But now that we have a standard, again, now these are not must-haves, these are things that we seek. And if a contract has this, it gets certain points. If a contract doesn't have it, it gets less points. That doesn't mean that a contract without it would not move forward.
Right.
Again, our main priority is to add value to our portfolio and to meet our compliance and procurement mandates. But now that we have a standard at the level of the board, when we bring a contract to you, we will tell you whether or not it met one of these
So
standards.
you'd show us the rubric and the score essentially.
Not that level of detail.
Not that level of
Yeah,
detail.
'cause,
Okay,
but we will
right.
tell you, by the way, you adopted these standards, we applied the standards, and
Okay.
for your information, this one is in an area that has Joshua trees or in an area with
Burrowing
vegetation.
owls or whatever.
Yeah.
Director Wally?
Thank you. So in other words, this is, as you pointed out, and thank you for that, this is not a requirement. This is more a qualitative assessment at the end of the day. Even though you're scoring points internally, you may end up choosing something which is whichever way you're counting, more points being less or more, whatever, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And it's going to be overall, does it make sense or not? It's more a guide.
Exactly.
And to remember every time, these are some important criteria to consider.
Exactly.
Okay, that helps. And I can see why a level of detail doesn't need to come to the board, makes perfect sense. I'm picking up on the question that Brian asked earlier, and I think I even heard you say, so how do we compare with the other CCAs regarding the selection criteria? Are we very different?
Oh, all right. So each CCA has a different version of this, and it's really tailored to their own communities. So there's I would say, a broad variety of the language that they use. I think some of the common ones that you will see across the CCAs are the prevailing wage portion, for example. You see that over, I think, most of the different project selection criteria. Location, different CCAs have different preferences for location, and they're worded slightly differently. Environmental stewardship is also another area where there's different preferences and different wording there. And then technology diversification, out of the ones that I've read, I think we're one of the only ones that really call that out. I'm sure other CCAs consider this as they look at different PPA proposals. But I know that our proposal has that kind of more specifically called out than the other ones that I've seen. So hopefully that helps give you a sense.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious in case there is something that we are not thinking of. Thanks.
Thank you. 1 second. Follow up? Actually, go ahead, Vice Chair. Yeah.
So when you send out your request for solicitation, I think do you include this rubric with that?
In the actual protocol, we'll talk about the things that we'll evaluate projects on. And, first and foremost is the ability to meet our requirements. So if we have a procurement mandate, that's what we're always seeking first. And those are usually driven by technology and commercial operation online dates. And then we'll also talk about how we'll do evaluation to make sure that the project adds value in addition to just compliance requirements. And then we'll also mention these other things that we'll evaluate project proposals on, yes.
But you don't include the rubric?
We don't include the rubric.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've responded to lots of RFPs in my day, and
We've
sometimes
done it both ways. There's pros and cons.
where I was kind of half going is, did you see, Anna, you made reference to other PPA selection standards. And how did you see those? Was it through, seeing other requests for solicitations? That's where I'm coming from.
No, generally, the other CCAs have standards or guidelines or methodology that also is something that their boards have seen as well. And sometimes there are also items that the board has adopted, but I have not seen them include rubrics necessarily. And we didn't, when I talked about how we compare to other CCAs, I didn't look at their solicitation materials in particular.
Yeah, we probably wouldn't want the board to establish a rubric with points because we need the flexibility to procure to whatever we're trying to procure towards, right? Whether it's a mandate or a need in the portfolio to add diversity or whatever. So, but if we prescribe the rubric, then it kind of ties my hands a bit on what we can and cannot do.
I'm just trying to understand the process, the cost, and the benefit.
Yep. But before we start to evaluate internally, when we get the proposals and then we start our evaluation process, we have an established rubric and that doesn't change, or that RFP or that RFO. And it's consistently applied through all the proposals.
So I like the idea of, the workforce development component and especially journeyman and all that, and as we're working with PLAs and looking at some of the federal infrastructure requirements, childcare is sometimes thrown into this as far as a requirement. And I'm not sure if, it's not a critical thing, but as far as getting funding, often that is a requirement now from a federal standpoint that they're requiring childcare for those people working on the project and all that. So, because it's not just the skilled and trained, like the journeyman, it's like, oh, well, now they actually have childcare, so it gives them a step up or something of that nature. Do you know if there's any CCAs that have been adding that component at all, or just wondering?
I'm not seeing that, no.
It's not that it's a requirement, it's conceivably, and for them to get the actual funding from a federal standpoint, that would probably be a line item that they'd be providing.
And so recently the IRS established the ITC and PTC benefits associated with project labor agreements. I think they've gone down another layer, Bennett, and talked about what exactly needs to be in that PLA, including the type of apprenticeship programs and other things. So it's all within that requirement that I think that we'll all be subject to.
Okay.
Because again, these projects, the ITC and PTC benefit is so big, the developer will not build a project without those benefits.
Absolutely. And that's the whole thing. It's like, it's not really a requirement from our standpoint, but it's part of their funding.
Right.
That in order to get those federal dollars, it won't get done unless they do it. So not that we see it as a criteria, but they're already going to do it. So just checking. Any other questions? Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item?
No hands raised, Chair.
No. Is there a motion? Vice Chair?
I'll make a motion to approve the power purchase agreement project selection standard.
Thank you.
Second. No, you got it? Okay.
Director Meadows.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Now we will move to item number 5. Authorize the Chief Executive Officer to negotiate and execute an office lease agreement.
Yeah, and before we get started, maybe I can clear a couple of things up now that I know the numbering on the. I got that right. But the other thing is that I think when we had originally started the staff report in this presentation, we were going to seek authorization, a delegation of authority to me to negotiate and execute a lease, but we since have changed our request. And so that's not reflected in this, it's reflected on the title, but I don't think it's reflected in the PowerPoint. So we're not asking you to authorize or delegate authority to me, but rather we're going to present to you a strategy that we want to implement with respect to looking for a new site. And so we need some parameters, some guidelines from you. And then once we find that site that meets those parameters, we'll bring that lease back to the board in closed session for execution.
So we don't need action today, we just.
No, we're gonna ask you to approve our recommended strategy that sets the parameters, the type of building and the location and the size that we'll look for. That narrows our field in, so we're not looking at everything in the universe, right? Okay, so with that, Karen is going to present.
Good afternoon, Executive Committee. My name is Karen Chang, Manager of Finance and Risk Controls. So we'll go over some of the strategies and what we've been doing just on the office building decisions and ask for recommendations. So today we're going to talk about some of the background, the timelines, what we're looking for, the needs and considerations. What have we been doing research on lease and own, and some strategy recommendations and the request. Quick background is that we have been in this building since 2017. Earlier, we were downstairs when the team was smaller, half of the size where we are today in terms of staff. We moved up here and expanded to the current space, 7,900 square footage. Our staff has grown since 30 to now almost 65. We'll be looking at 75 soon. So since COVID, we have been remote. Some employees do come into the office. We do have quarterly retreats that are required, and it's offsite because the space that's needed. We have the board meeting offsite, and then committee meetings are here in the office. Sometimes we have community events, that's offsite as well. So back in fiscal year 23-24, we asked for a budget for purchasing a building, $20 million that's set aside, that's still there, that got approved last year. So a timeline just to show you what we're looking at. Our current lease expires next year, November. But in order to make a decision, we need to start the research and looking at opportunities now so that we could finish and decide what to do and move out of here or renew the lease by November 2025. That's why we're here today talking about upcoming decisions. So the deadline is October this year to make a decision, and then whether we renew or move out, it will be 2025. So some of the strategies that we've been thinking about is we wanted to make sure that the space we have will be able to accommodate our remote environment. And then we also have to make sure there's the need for community to have access and then make sure we can hold public meetings. We looked at purchase versus lease of a new building. Currently, this office right now is Class B. We're thinking about Class A for potential opportunities. And we look at different terms of lease, 1 to 3 years or 1 to 5 years. We want to make sure that the term is flexible as well. Location, of course, we wanted to make sure it's within our community, cities, and probably near public transportation, but just close by. So some of the considerations of why are we thinking about expanding is, of course, a growing team, staff size, and we want to encourage more collaboration. People can come into the office, have meetings. Also for stakeholder experience, want to have a better community, a space that's better for the community. We can also host different events. And then also considering for future growth and just employee well-being, they feel, staff feels comfortable coming into the office, and we can encourage collaboration. So here's analysis, just showing some numbers of how we decide what's the size that we're looking for, what's a good size for us. So I took some calculations from certain websites that has some formulas for office space. So with 75 employees, we have, for like an average density, we need about 15,000 square footage. And then we have some large conference rooms, large space for everyone. But since we're hybrid, so I kind of, we use the 50% of the desk space, but we still keep all the large common areas. So that brings us to about 11,000 to 15,000. We think that's a good space for us going forward. Right now we're at 8,000, which is considered a little bit crowded when everyone comes into the office. So there are 4 different options or ideas that we have been considering. The first one is if we just stay at the current space, we don't expand, which is 8,000 square footage, but we extend the current lease for a few more years. Or we can stay at the same space, but we expand to a suite next to us to make it a little larger. That will bring us to the 11,000 square footage. And then number 3 is if we completely move out of here, we go to a different building. Hopefully it will be a Class A building, still within the service territory, and probably better amenities. Some of them may have all hands space that we can host for retreats, which we don't have to pay for rental fees. And then number 4 is if we purchase a building like what we were considering earlier. So we ran some numbers, and here are the options the 4 options and the rough numbers, and these are just estimates. But the first one, if we don't do anything, we stay at the current space, there's an annual recurring cost, which is the rent, rental space for external, and we actually have external storage space as well. Projected cost for 5 years. Number 2 is if we expand a little bit, costs increase a little bit, probably need a little bit of initial renovation cost to get the space ready for the expansion. Option number 3 is if we completely move out of this office, go to a new office, Class A, rental price per square footage may be a little higher, but probably more amenities. And we can save recurring costs like storage and event space rentals. And then number 4 is if we buy completely, get a brand new office or something that's on the market within our needs, and that will be a high initial cost, but probably will the recurring cost will be lower. Any questions so far?
So, I like the analysis and you're laying out the numbers for both the square footage required. I really like that. The last one, item 4, so it's under the 5-year cost, the 13 to 15. That's the capital cost plus the operating cost, or is it, what is that?
Yeah, so initial like purchasing price plus maybe monthly, there's a small management cost, utilities, like all the other stuff included. So 5-year cost includes all of the operating cost.
Buying the building as well as,
Right.
operations.
And whereas the other ones are all operating costs.
The other ones are in rent.
And rent,
Yeah.
rent being.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rent.
Yeah.
Amrit, question for you, would we have to capitalize this under new accounting rules, or is this an operating lease?
Our current lease is it is capitalized under, I forget the title, the accounting rule, but we had to make a change a few years ago to meet with the new accounting rules.
Okay, not part of the decision making, that's just accounting.
Yeah.
As I'm looking at the numbers, I'm kind of wondering those things. Okay, sorry, I had a couple questions on this slide.
Yep.
Other questions on this slide?
I am just curious about, are there very big differences between Class A and Class B in terms of the needs for SVCE? Because we don't, and I'm not saying Class A is not good, I'm just curious. Typically, we want to do that high-end thing because we need to entertain clients. And in this case, I'm curious, why are we, what's the big thing in our minds? Just curious.
I think that as we've been touring the Class A and Class B buildings, one thing that, first of all, the rents are almost on par now, right? relative to what we have in this space, because we rented this place before COVID. There's a lot of Class A stock in this area, especially Sunnyvale, lots of it. And so they're newer buildings, so they have a lot, not just newer amenities that workforce likes, but also just newer buildings with a lot of better HVAC systems, just more comfortable AV systems, all these types of things that, we have in this building, and it works perfectly fine. It's just, we're talking about another 5 years from now.
You gave me the answer, that the rents in Class A are down.
That too, yeah.
That's it.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah, that just says it all.
Actually.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Next slide.
And just wanted to share some considerations we have. There's pros and cons, of course, for leasing. You'll have a landlord which manages the facilities, or if there's anything that is not working, we just call the landlord. If we have to own the building ourselves, then we have to manage it ourselves. And the list is, there's quite a big list here, but basically we wanted to make sure that all of our considerations, we look at all of these financially, see if it's practical, and strategically we wanted to make sure we make the right decision. And here's just a visual to show the comparison. On the left-hand side, it's a 5-year total cost comparison. On the right-hand side is a 17-year. So on the left-hand side, the first one is if we stay here, what would the cost be in total 5 years? Option number 2 is if we expand over, once we over maybe we'll make it into 11,000 square footage. And then the third option is if we lease a new building, potentially could be Class A, could have bigger all-hand space, share space downstairs. Or option 4 is if we buy the whole, a new office. So our analysis shows that with today's market, we will probably break even in the 17th year, and that is just estimates. And like Monica was saying, right now there's a lot of vacant office space out there, so rental market can probably negotiate more. And that's why we're doing the comparison here, just to show the cost difference in total. So if we are thinking about purchasing, here's the 2 timelines that we will have to consider. If we wanted to purchase, starting the research now, it'll take us a while to find a place. And if we find a place, we have to do tenant improvements. We have to renovate the space and then take time to move. So if this first column, option 1, if we purchase and start thinking about options now, we will probably need to extend the lease for 1 year. Either we extend here or we find a place for 1 year. But we wouldn't be able to finish moving into the new space if we were to purchase within the 2025 timeline. So option 2 is if we start the search in 2026, so if we start a search later, we'll need more time, which means we need to extend the lease a little longer or find a place for the interim 3 to 5 years, 3 to 4 years. So overall, we're saying that to purchase, we will take longer for the research and may not meet the timeline in 2025 before this lease expires.
Chair, go ahead.
If what I'm hearing is the Class B and Class A markets are soft right now in Sunnyvale. So if I was the landlord here, I would probably welcome a lease extension, and now may be the time to negotiate that. Maybe I'm stating the obvious.
Right, yes. As this timeline shows, we're gonna likely have to renegotiate our lease because there's no way we can move out by next September into another space. Well, we don't think that that's feasible if we purchased. But yes, certainly that is on the table, and it's something that we've been working with our real estate firm, is to give this current landlord a proposal on what we think we should be paying for the space and what we would want out of the space. So we'll offer and we'll see what we get. Yes, that's part of the process.
Are we negotiating just for the current space or also with the option of extending adjacent space?
Yes, both.
Both.
Of course, we won't talk about any of the details in public. Once we get there, we'll bring it to closed session.
Yeah, because ideal situation would be get more space or whatever we are paying today. That's
Or
one.
less.
Or less. Or less is less.
I know.
Less is more.
Yeah,
More space for less.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Definitely commercial rental rates are very, very soft right now across the Bay Area.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just a quick summary, we talked about the reason for why we're looking for an office space and then potential need for expanding because of staff growth. And the timeline of 2025 is when this lease expires. Our considerations for lease, Class A or Class B, or purchase timeline, and the cost comparison. Any questions on any of the items that we went over?
I had a few questions. So definitely transportation becomes a big thing for anyone in the Bay Area. And I know that we value the importance of remote work as much as possible. So wherever we're choosing, it's like trying to make sure that it's accessible to whatever transportation, public transportation, hopefully, Caltrain, BART, whatever is critical. Have we done when I was at a startup and we did a similar sort of evaluation, one of the things that we did was kind of do a heat map of where all of the employees are currently living. And I know people move around all the time, but just trying to figure that out as you're going through the search. And then as far as offsites, you talked about meetings, kind of larger meeting space for employees. And would it be, I'm assuming executive board, but would it also conceivably be the standard board meeting moving forward?
Yeah, that's another thing we're looking at.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, we lease space from the city of Cupertino, which is fine. They've been really good hosts, but it would be ideal for us to have our own space that we could have our board meetings, both from a staff standpoint in terms of not having to lug everything over and just, I think we've been in existence now since 2016. I think we've established our presence. And I think we need kind of a space to show that presence as well. In terms of the location of where staff lives, it's certainly a consideration for sure. Much more pre-COVID than now, right? Because our staff lives in places everywhere, but they also work remotely. There was a big interest by one of our executive senior staff members to consider a location in Milpitas because it's closer to where he lives and where I live too, by the way. But another consideration we have to have is our community, that's not central to our community, right? It's on the far end of and our board would also have to go there for meetings too. And so we're also looking at, what is our board, balancing our board and community with location, proximity to staff. But certainly we've heard from staff that they do like public transportation, and that's really important in the decision. Because they do have, when they do come here, some of them are coming from Oakland now, or from Marin, and all over the Bay Area. Yes, we have several up in the North Bay now.
Yeah, and I think part of this might change, of course, as I was saying earlier this week, when Caltrain electrifies in September, and conceivably, there's trains stopping every 15 minutes on the majority of the line going north and south. So that's actually very positive. And talked about meetings. Oh, and you talked a little bit about employee events or kind of team building and all of that. In the interim, we need to talk about City Hall is not that far away from here, and I think we could figure out something from the Sunnyvale City Hall.
Oh, that'd be great, because we have reached out to your staff to use the space, but I don't think the timings work for us. But we've been rotating between different member agencies, community centers. Last month, we were at Cupertino's, and we've been in Milpitas, we're hoping to be in Sunnyvale's in September, and then in Los Altos in December. So it's also a nice opportunity for us to visit the communities too. But, they're 2-day retreats, and staff has to move from one place to another, it would be nice to at least spend half of it, half the time in our own space too.
Okay. That was all of my questions. Any other questions? Dr. Walia?
So when we're looking at the costs, does this incorporate the costs of those offsites?
Yes.
This is already included.
That storage cost, because we store quite a bit of our stuff offsite. The rental fees for the city of Cupertino, yes.
Because to me, the qualitative benefits that cannot be captured in the dollar amount costs of having everything under one umbrella, the convenience and the time saving and the running around is of immense value for staff to be able to face. And question time, can I add a comment?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We still haven't gotten to the recommendation.
the
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll hold off.
Okay.
I'll hold off. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead, go to the next. Yeah, go to the next slide.
So the proposed plan forward is with these parameters. We're looking for a lease option of 3 to 7 years, and we wanted to make sure they're flexible in case we need to terminate early. And so that's the opt-out early opportunity if we can negotiate that into the contract. For space, we're looking at around 11,000 to 14,000. And then these are the cities that we're mostly looking at, central to our community. And then we'll need to make sure there's initial capital expenditure costs allowed, meaning the initial renovation, tenant improvement, and just movers, all of that to get us to the next place. And then we may want to consider extending current lease based on our negotiation and the opportunities that we have and research that we do. So the office building purchase option, we are not going to let go of that. We'll make sure that is still being reviewed and probably revisit that in 2028. That was approved last year and is still in the budget for that we set aside for building purchase. So the request here for the executive committee is to authorize the CEO to pursue an office space within the parameters that we went over. And the last bullet point is if a new lease is not able to start by October 2025, we would like to ask for your authorization for the CEO to extend up to 6 months. And then the actual terms will bring it to the board in October 2024 in closed sessions.
So does this make sense? Since staff needs some, like I said, guardrails, because the universe is too big for us to like we could look at all kinds of things, but we need some guardrails, and we'll find a building that fits within these parameters and the associated budget with it, and then we'll bring that to the board in closed session for approval.
Vice Chair.
So let me just walk through, I'll be looking there. So 3 to 5 year lease with target date of October 25. But then the fourth bullet point says if it's not available to start October 25, then 6 months later.
Yeah, we'd have to be able to extend this.
I think that's, I like that. 11 to 14,000 square feet of a Class A building. So Class A, same price as Class B, step up. And 11 to 14 fits the parameters that you had outlined. Located within our service territory, that's a given. So I'm liking this. Subject to public comment, I will definitely support this.
Question?
So just one clarifying question, then I'll give comments. So this slide, you're saying 3 to 5 year lease, and just the prior slide proposed plan, you're saying 3 to 7 year lease?
Yeah, I think that our main target will be 3 to 5, 3 to 7, just to give us like a flexible term. Some of them may not be as flexible, but I think we will go out with 3 to 5.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's probably, I think 5 is the max that we would go out
Okay.
And of course, if we went further than 5, if we decided to go 7, because the terms are better 7, that would again be subject to board approval.
Sure. I was just curious because one slide you're saying proposed 3 to 7, the next one you're saying asking is 3 to 5 request.
Yeah, I saw that too.
So again, my comments are, well, extension of this current if needed, of course, that's a no-brainer, we've got to do it. I do like the idea of going with Class A building and the target service territory, those 4 cities you mentioned, they are central. I think that's important. The vicinity of public transportation is very important as well. Very proud to see a lot of the employees from SVCE actually using that. So I think making it convenient for them is important. Having some background in commercial architecture, especially designing office buildings, even though it seems a lifetime ago, my quick thoughts are, and 3 to 5 years, that least not an issue. Do not skimp on the square footage. So do not stay at 11,000 if you're able to get something better. The needs increase. We know number of staff is going to increase and some other things may change, but the biggest thing is that space you will need for board meetings, staff retreats, this and that takes up a heck of a lot of space, having designed office spaces. That's my big comment. Or on the side of something larger, not just for the individual cubicle space. And so to me, this sounds pretty reasonable and pretty good. And I know we have talked recently about the idea of purchasing, and so extending it further away makes sense because we are not in the business of management. It's having a whole new team to manage and taking our focus away from our actual mission.
Yeah, the real estate agents that we've been working with suggested that as an interim step and something that we might consider is finding a standalone building to lease where we would have to do our own management. And so that might be a step in that direction for us to learn how to establish those agreements, if we wanted to learn how to, I guess, or we just take the plunge and buy one and be forced to manage and operate a building. But so that's something that we're actually looking at as well, if that makes sense. But some of these larger Class A buildings, they have so many amenities associated with them that
it's fabulous. So after public comment, I'm happy to support this.
Oh, I don't know if you have a.
I don't think I have any questions.
Could you go back one slide, because that has the locations? So when I think of public transportation, in particular, the electrification of the trains, that kind of eliminates Campbell and Cupertino and Sunnyvale and Mountain View.
Well, Cupertino, I've been told over and over, has this little zip car or something, like a,
SV Hopper,
yes, and
but
that,
it covers actually Santa Clara, Sunnyvale. So we're adding it to Sunnyvale in the next year, so.
so that if somebody takes Caltrain to say wherever Mountain View, they could jump on
They
that
can
little
jump
thing.
that, but then they're paying. So they're paying per trip
okay.
past that.
All right.
As opposed to and not that that's the be all end all, but they do pay per ride, because I had a car in the shop and I took it from the Caltrain station to our meeting in Cupertino, and it was $3.75, $4, but it's charge. So as opposed to walking, what I'm assuming, well, what I always liked and what I'm assuming employees would want would be walking distance to the train station.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we didn't eliminate Campbell because quite frankly, Campbell is a lot cheaper than Sunnyvale and Mountain View. And so there's some nice places there too, and it happens to be close to a lot of staff who live in the south part of our service territory.
Again, it's that guidelines. That's what I noticed that, and thank you for bringing that point up. But I figured, just generally speaking, geographically, that's central to the service territory.
Yeah, and so this here defines kind of like what we'll strategize. The next slide kind of puts parameters around the cost Right, and so I know that, this gives me some cost parameters that we can use when we go and negotiate.
Any other comments, questions? Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
No hands raised, Chair.
Oh, then I'd like to make a motion to give staff the title is different.
Yeah, the titles are
Just say move staff recommendation.
So, yeah,
Staff request.
that we I'd like to make a motion to approve staff's request as outlined on the slide.
Second.
Thank you. Everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Next, we will go on to item 4, recommend accessible on-bill financing pilot contract for SVCE Board of Directors approval. We have Jasmine.
Thank you. Let me see. Okay, so I'm Jessamine Allen. I'm a program lead on our programs and policy team. And I will be presenting this concept for our on-bill financing pilots. We want to be seeking your input as well as the recommendation for the pilot contracts, which we plan on bringing to the August Board of Directors meeting. So when we talk about the challenge of decarbonizing existing homes, nearly 50% of emissions in the built environment comes from residential natural gas. With hundreds of thousands of these appliances in our service territory, we're approaching a $4 billion price tag, and I do want to note that is a total cost, not just an incremental cost of going gas to electric, which we've often talked about in other discussions. And I talk about the total cost is because there are certain customers that struggle to afford kind of the basic energy appliances, and that's part of the challenge that we'll be addressing. And we know that taxpayers and ratepayers will be subsidizing a portion of these costs, and property owners will bear some portion of those costs. And if we look at the spectrum across, taking income, for example, for low-income customers, we're moving towards this direct install approach where we're covering kind of 100% of costs. And then on the other end of the spectrum, decades of energy programs have showed that more conventional forms of financing and incentives have tended to benefit upper income households. And so that leaves this middle or moderate income group in the middle, indicated by the green question mark, that really struggle to participate in energy programs, either because they might be excluded or, from conventional forms of financing just due to credit score requirements, and then without some sort of mechanism to help cover that high upfront cost, they struggle to take advantage of rebates or tax credits because they have to go out of pocket for weeks to months before being reimbursed. And so this is where our proposal for on-bill financing comes in. This is where the cost recovery occurs on the utility bill. And there's been many programs across the country and even some within the state of California that have had good uptake in currently underserved customer segments, and also just tend to be very secure programs with low default rates. So if we go to this kind of challenge that we're talking about, and this is a very simple example of, let's say, a heat pump water heater project costing $5,500. Typically, a customer has to go out of pocket that full $5,500. And then, while there are significant incentives available, that money comes weeks to months later. And so some people really struggle to carry, $5,500 worth of costs. In our on-bill financing pilot, we're going to be looking at the bill savings to help reduce any out-of-pocket costs to the customers by leveraging the bill savings achieved with the project. And so there are some customers that can save money from electrification going gas to electric. Those bill savings are really dependent on what the existing type of equipment is, what the new equipment installed, energy usage pattern, rates, there's a lot of different factors, but we can identify people that have good savings potential. And so what we do in this on-bill financing pilot is we're still heavily leveraging those rebates and kind of gathering whatever incentives we can. In our pilot, we would be kind of carrying those costs of the rebates. So one, the customer never has to go out of pocket. And then two, we add this layer of financing. And what we do with we kind of have these rules about how much of the project we would finance, and we tie it to the bill savings achieved and constrain it to be less than the bill savings so that the customer does have an on-bill cost recovery charge, but that is offset by any of the bill savings across the gas and electric bills. And then this helps really minimize and sometimes even eliminate any upfront customer co-payment. And sometimes you can completely eliminate the co-payment. It just really depends on the incentives available and how much you can finance. And again, because that finance component is constrained by the bill savings achieved by the project. So a bit more detail about what this pilot would look like. And just to reiterate, this is an on-bill financing program. So there is an on-bill cost recovery charge. This is an additional line item on the CCA portion of the utility bill, of the electric bill. This is a loan. It would be 0% interest for a 10-year term. 10 years really to helps really keep those monthly payments low and match the bill savings achieved. And as I said, the goal is to get no to low out-of-pocket cost to the customer, and that on-bill loan repayment is offset by savings across the gas and electric bills due to that project. Really, any technology that delivers bill savings could be eligible, but we need to be focusing on technologies that deliver significant bill savings, so water heating, space conditioning, energy efficiency. We're also looking at solar and storage, pairing it with electrification. Currently aiming at a scale of around several hundred customers. Because it is a loan, we're still going to be targeting single-family residential homeowners primarily. And then again, because we need to be targeting people with the high bill savings potential, there's kind of some analyses and pre-screening that we can do. And then also we want to try to target moderate income households because this is an underserved customer segment that typically struggles to participate in energy programs. And there's not a super strict definition, but on the order of 80 to 150% AMI. We would also have strong customer protections incorporated into the pilot, including that the equipment would be warranted and there's customer support available throughout the payback period. And so this concept, this is a new financing concept to SVCE. There are on-bill financing programs offered by IOUs and CCAs for residential or commercial customers. But what is really unique about our offering is tying the loan amount into the bill savings achieved through the project for fuel switching, not just pure energy efficiency, but the hard part is the bill savings through fuel switching. And so going back to that problem we were kind of outlining about underserved customer segments, we believe this financing will be more accessible in part because there's essentially no net ongoing cost to the customer because that on-bill charge should be offset by bill savings. We're reducing or eliminating any out-of-pocket upfront costs to the customers. We also want to be targeting customers that are traditionally not served by energy programs. And then especially at the pilot level, we want to build in strong customer protections so that customers have that assurance that the equipment is working and will deliver the bill savings that they had been, that the loan was kind of based upon. And this would be a key step in our broader financing roadmap. We have various efforts looking at capital requirements to support electrification in our service territory. We've also been part of a statewide discussion with the IOUs and the CPUC on residential on-bill financing. And so this is a pilot that will test many of the key elements and inform that statewide discussion. And so this is a kind of a complex arrangement endeavor, but we have help. One organization being TECH. It's actually a statewide initiative. They are funded through the CPUC. It's a team of different program implementers and finance advocates that would be supporting this pilot. So they are playing kind of an advisory and co-management role, and we've been working with them actually for the past couple years. And then in terms of the actual kind of pilot operations around the project origination and providing that customer support during the payback period, we would be working with Franklin Energy, which is a program implementer with extensive experience in performance-based programs, so extensive experience delivering energy savings. In terms of funding, we would be drawing upon an already allocated pool of program funds. Over the past several years, we've already allocated over $5 million under the accessible financing bucket. So we would be drawing kind of SVCE contribution from that money. Our tech collaborators are also bringing several million dollars to this effort of their own funds to support the pilot. And then we are still heavily leveraging outside dollars, rebates, and any incentive basically we can get our hands on, because these projects, we need to be reducing the the overall project cost. So we've had discussions around risk and risk mitigation with various departments across SVCE and legal, and these will be ongoing through the contracting and then even before the pilot launch. Some of the major kind of core risks identified is this potential for the bill savings not to materialize. And so a huge part of this pilot is a really robust effort around the original kind of methodology to estimate the bill savings and then evaluation of the realized savings delivered to customers. And then there's additionally, risk mitigation funds and being clear with customers kind of what are the different factors that can impact their bills. Then, of course, there is the potential for non-payment of the on-bill charge. Probably the scenario we'd most be most concerned is someone moving within or out of our service territory. So this is part of the reason, this is a pilot, we're using program funds, but we're also looking at different kind of mechanisms or safeguards to help, maximize that repayment. And then, similar to other programs, there just could be issues at the time of installation with the equipment or the contractors. So again, this is, an effort we're still working on legal and following best practices from existing contracts and just really building in kind of strong protections. So when we come back in August, the plan is we would have actually 2 contracts because we are working with kind of 2 different entities on this. One being with TECH. Energy Solutions is an actual company that is the lead implementer of the TECH program. And so they would be having a supporting role, and that contract would dictate kind of what their role is and how SVCE would kind of use their funds in the pilot. And then the other contract would be with Franklin Energy, who would be kind of the actual implementer. And again, that's covering the initial kind of project and loan origination, as well as a supporting role during that cost recovery period. So I do want to highlight this is an effort we've been working on for several years, and there's been a lot of work done, a lot of conversations. And so we're at the point now where we can bring this to the board to seek your feedback. Our goal is to have the contracts brought for approval in August, launch by end of year. Then there's about a year where we actually complete the projects, start the on-bill cost recovery, followed by this kind of follow-up evaluation of what the realized savings are. That's a big part of this pilot, as I've mentioned. Use those learnings to start informing this statewide discussion on residential finance. And then there is a 10-year cost recovery period, so this would extend through 2036. So that's, and I know I have some extra slides which I can reference if needed, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Sure. First Director Walia.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessamine. That's quite an exciting presentation to me. I'm just I don't know what's the right way to put it. It makes it feasible, just the whole concept makes me think that people who are interested and just that upfront cost of $5,500 plus plenty of electric work at pretty much every home because we have older housing stock here. So that makes it a lot more reachable, doable for folks who are interested. And thank you for the dollar amount that you have presented. I just added that up. So roughly between the two contracts and our 5.2, we're looking at $12 million.
So the SVCE commitment would be up to $5.2 million, and then our tech, they have several $1 million. So it's more in the order of like $8 million.
What about I thought Franklin Energy as well, that's for.
Oh, yeah, but so our allocation of the 5 million, that's what's going to the Franklin contract.
Paying Franklin.
Yeah.
So the total, what are we looking at for this pilot for 200 customers?
For SVC's contribution, it would be max of 5.2 million, and we're moving that downward in part because we've recently contracted with Franklin for the turnkey project, for the big, so we're gonna be, there are certain costs that are now more incremental. So some of the admin costs are currently changing, but we would be drawing from our accessible financing contribution, which is, we currently have $5.2 million allocated in that pool of funding.
So maybe walk us through, like, if a customer wants to participate in this and it costs them $5,500, how does the money flow? Who gets paid?
Yeah, so what would happen is there would be kind of a project assessment to, a house assessment to, confirm the project cost. We'll be leveraging also the pre-negotiated pricing through the single-family turnkey program because it's also with Franklin. So we're gonna be using those parameters and then dictating a final kind of project cost. Then Franklin would have, because they're taking on this kind of evaluation role to make sure these projects would pencil out. They have to confirm, the rebates would be available and then that the customer would be eligible for them. They redo like a bill savings analysis to see what fraction of the project cost can be financed. For a heat pump water heater and HVAC project, that's 20 to 30% of the costs. That's what we can do right now with rates. And then if there is any kind of leftover amount, that would be the customer copay. But the goal is to minimize or eliminate that customer copay.
How long does all of this process take if the customer reaches out to you, or intention?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I'd have to look at, we're gonna be probably following some of the same guidelines as the single family installation, but scheduling a home assessment, I don't know what the turnaround is, but within days, or there's some sort of tool where a customer can go in. Because we need to do that initial kind of financial analysis, there's a bit more, there'll be a bit more time versus in the turnkey program, or I think we call it the single family installation, they'll get almost an immediate offer because they aren't looking at they don't have to redo that bill savings analysis, but we would be presenting them with a financial offer within, a couple days.
All I'm suggesting is it would be good for us to have some idea, because when we talk to residents will say, how long will it take? If I need something, how soon do I need to reach out? Because that's the constant challenge. So it's not an issue for me, but we should, as SVCE, we should be ready with some kind of answers about the process, the different steps, exactly as Monica asked you. Walk me. So if I'm calling you, I'm a resident, I have no clue, but I want to do this. All the random questions I'm asking, I would like SVCE to give me the answer. How would we walk through it? That's essentially my point there.
And I'm assuming that'll be part of our marketing materials. We'll have from the customers or the participants' perspective, how the program would look and what they need to do and what their expectations are. We'll
the price and the timeline.
Yeah, and I know from the single family installation program, we do have certain requirements about how quickly things happen, and projects have to happen within 2 weeks from initial scope, or responses within 24 to 48 hours. So we would be leveraging a lot of those same requirements for the implementer, but also making sure that's clear to the customer about when they'll expect a response, when a project will be installed.
Yes, otherwise we'll end up chaining a lot of the dissatisfaction there. So two other quick questions for you. What are the downsides for us or the resident? And the other question is, long-term, how are we going to manage this with Tech as well as Franklin? And how, I'm assuming this is going to be a great success because we're suddenly making it reachable, doable for a resident. So have we given any thought to how far we're going to scale it and how we are going to be able to scale that? So I know that's a bunch of questions, but just trying to get some sense.
Yeah, I mean, a major reason why we are working with Tech is they are focused on scalability. And so they are, this is part of the evaluation that they'll be doing because ideally we want to drive down some of these, admin and other costs. And, there are certain customer protections that they cost money to implement, such as warranties. And so some of these will look at kind of what's needed versus, to scale it and what the cost impacts would be. So we are working with that organization because they're really focused on scalability. And I think, one of these key questions about scalability is how well, we can predict those bill savings and making sure that customers are getting the bill savings that we're estimating. And then also this repayment risk. Because in order to be investing more money, whether our own or looking to outside sources of capital, we have to know this non-payment risk. And so it's part of the kind of state conversations, because again, those are focused on scaling and programs that will serve millions of households. Those are some of the big questions about getting some of the kind of admin and operational costs down, and then assessing the kind of security of the investment while protecting customers. And so again, some of the scalability is by doing this pilot and sharing, improving our own offering, but also discussing and sharing it at the state level that will have benefits for scalability and other organizations that would be interested in this model.
I find this very exciting because this is somehow making the whole concept of what we want to achieve doable. We are making it happen because residents don't know how to navigate that whole process. Mm-hmm. And we are just saying, we're going to handle all of this for you. All you have to do is pay something. It's exciting.
Thank you. Director Meadows?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I agree. This is really an interesting and attractive opportunity. And you talk about sustainability and scalability. What's going through my mind is, okay, so somebody sells the house, they're not going to pull out the water heater and give it back to you. Right. So, and maybe on the pilot, I don't know what you haven't explicitly said, maybe on the pilot, we're eating that cost. I hope not, but I mean, yeah. In reality, to make this a sustainable program, don't we have to do like in the original days of solar where they kind of, mm-hmm. I don't know what their financing was, but I have the impression was, the company will put the panels up and then we get the benefit for X and then eventually you own it or whatever. So I just wonder what kind of thinking do you have for the pilot? I mean, are we just going to eat it when someone sells the house? Or have you talked to realtors or realtor organizations to see, is this something that gets added? Do you sign something that, this house has this piece that comes with this heat pump water heater, it comes with an obligation, this is what your bill's gonna look like. How are you handling that? Because that will be a big thing.
Yeah, obviously we want people to continue paying the on-bill charge, and then the kind of default typically with this on-bill financing is that they pay off the balance when they move. The good thing is that a lot of on-bill financing programs, people do that, but we're also looking, and again, this is still very early consideration, but we would be working with legal for high-value projects. So projects, we are looking at solar and storage, and those, that's a much bigger loan amount we're looking at because there's much bigger savings. The potential for liens, so that there is a kind of notice associated with the property, and that would either need to be paid off during the property transfer. So we're still looking if legally we can do that, and then there's the question of, we might be, in conversations with housing departments, agencies, that kind of stuff, but the goal is, yes, we need to maximize this repayment and kind of what are the kind of legal options, what are we actually going to do? So that's still under consideration, but the goal is to maximize that repayment.
And that might help you in screening too, customers who you actually want to trial. They say, okay, I want to take this, but by the way, I put a down payment on a house. We're moving in 3 months.
We might be doing things like asking people if they plan to move in the next 5 years, or, so there's other things we can do at the beginning as well. And the good thing is we are looking at, trying to gather what data we can on like housing turnover. The good thing in kind of California is that people tend to stay in their homes longer because of housing prices. So there are certain things that work in our favor, but we're definitely looking at that risk.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair?
I don't really have any questions. They're more comments, so I don't know if you want to circle
I have a
back.
few questions, so yeah. So definitely I saw the equipment lien and I was wondering, is it only for, what levels of equipment? Because it's the investment in trying to cover some of it, sometimes it's worthwhile writing it off.
Yeah.
And so
for like a heat pump water heater and HVAC project, that loan will be typically less than $10,000. So it might not be worth kind of a lien. But I think it's the main reason we've been looking into that or considering it is if we're looking at solar and storage, because now we're talking about potentially loans of tens of thousands of dollars.
And nowhere in here I saw owner occupied. Is that part of this? Or?
Yeah, so single family residential homeowners. I think we want to keep the option to explore what a renter scenario could look like, but obviously we would have an agreement with the property owner so that maybe the renter pays that on-bill charge, but if there's any kind of transfer of property, some of those obligations still are to the homeowner.
And that was my worry because it was, because it depends on what the entity is. So it's like, it's easy when it's the property owner and living there. If it's someone else renting, then who's paying for the bill and all that? It's normally the renter, and so, but.
We would need to have an agreement with the property owner.
Okay,
In that case.
that was one of my bigger questions. And then equipment, it's kind of an interesting concept, and not that homeowners or, put in equipment all the time, but the life of the equipment and the expectation, it's slightly different that we incentivize them to replace the equipment. Mm-hmm. If there's problems, how quickly that's fixed, all that, so the maintenance portion, are we getting into that business? Is that what is it? Is it Franklin would be managing how quickly we would respond to service in that area, or what?
I think the homeowner would be required for kind of basic operations and maintenance. If there are issues with the equipment, they would be able to contact Franklin, and Franklin would be able to say, okay, this falls under warranty, and then they would take the next steps to how to figure out how to, get that equipment addressed via the warranty agreements. Okay. So there will be kind of certain things that are covered and certain things that are not, but that warranty throughout that payback period would address kind of the major issues we would identify with equipment that aren't the fault of the property owner.
Yeah. Okay. No, in general, it's as was said before, it's breaking some of those barriers for that middle income that don't have the disposable income to upgrade their house, and so why go through that process and finding a different way to fund it? So I'm really positive from that standpoint. Vice Chair.
These are kind of comments. First of all, now I understand the gentleman that I met at the CCA conference in San Jose from Franklin.
Oh, who was it? Jonathan?
There were several that were there. I sat at the table with them at one of the things. So now I understand their business a little bit. My next one is this feels kind of like leasing a Tesla Model Y. where they say, okay, we'll take your rebate as part of the lease. And then we're trying to crank your upfront payment down as low as possible and then have your lease payments as low. But remember those fuel savings? You know, and they just crank all, and I'm like, okay, I've seen this movie before. So this is all really exciting. And I think, to echo your comments, you know, this is very, very innovative, and how do we operationalize electrification for our customers? So I'm pretty jazzed about this. And my other comment is that I've kind of gone through all these numbers, with our solar system, because our production was declining because we had some problems with the equipment, and it was unbeknownst to me. So I had to make an investment, so that making sure that the equipment is operating is really key, because you're not going to get your payback. And I wasn't getting mine. And then the other thing was, when I invested in some HVAC, I had to go through all the upfront, then apply for the rebates, et cetera. And I feel the customer pain, but fortunately I was able to do it. But to have it on my bill would be just so much better. So I'm pretty jazzed and would be looking forward to the results of the pilot. And this must be an immense amount of work.
But like I said, Tech, it's a great organization. They have a huge statewide incentive program, you know, and a lot of great people on that. So they've been supporting this and the original concept and everything, so.
Can you share a little bit about what the state is trying to do with the tariff on bill financing program?
Yeah, so basically, there are some slides in the extra section where our goal is eventually to do this concept called tariffed on bill financing. It's a very similar concept where the finance component is tied to the bill savings. But in that type of financing, it's considered a utility investment and not a loan. And they can assign that cost recovery charge to the meter, not the person. And that cost recovery charge would apply automatically to successor occupants. So you don't need to worry about the property transfer and renter situations. So that's what we're engaged with at the state level. There's a finance proceeding. We submitted really the original proposal for tariffed on bill. That is just taking time because we need regulatory approval for that cost recovery tariff.
Is this the CPUC?
Yes. Yes, but
to?
yes. And it's also technically, it's, you know, the PG&E has a tariff authority. It's not a CCA tariff authority. So there's this regulatory component, and then also the cost recovery charges on the PG&E side of the bill. And they are going through a billing modernization effort. So this is part of the reason why it's taking, we were hoping to have a pilot already launched a year or two ago under tariffed on bill. But that is still several years out. So this is why we've moved in this on-bill financing. It's kind of an interim, a way to have an offering to our customers, drive some of these early learnings to hopefully eventually be able to do tariffed on-bill financing, which, like I said, because it's tied to the meter, there's this automatic succession. It's much more than renters. You can have that participation. So that is kind of the goal, and that's where some of the scalability comes in, where the learnings from this would inform a tariffed on bill offering, because we're doing a lot of the same things, tying the repayment to the bill savings, figuring out what the operations and kind of maintenance needs to be, what kind of customer protections do we need to build in, what is that repayment risk, and it should be lower under a tariffed on bill financing. So that's, you know, that is kind of this other vision that we have of using this pilot to inform some larger conversations on financing.
Anything else? Anything else? Director Walia?
So am I, a little clarification needed for me at least. So what we are doing now, is that going to be taken away once the tariffed on bill financing comes through?
No,
are
we
they going to run
could, we
in-house?
could keep this offering, we could expand it, we could, just do on-bill financing where maybe it's not tied to bill savings, like we would still use the same kind of infrastructure. Or we could use some of this infrastructure in a tariffed on-bill kind of for future customers. But the customers that come in under on-bill financing, they would always have a loan. We wouldn't be transferring them to this like other financial kind of product. So this would still be, all the customers going through this pilot would still be in our on-bill financing. We still have, that customer support and that on-bill cost recovery charge throughout the entire term.
So the delay you mentioned with PG&E a couple of years, did I understand you correctly that PG&E already has the authority, but SVCE is supporting it so that the CCAs can also get the authority to do
So
that?
PG&E doesn't have the authority
Gotcha.
right now, so we still need the CPUC approval. And from what we understand, this has to be a utility, a PG&E investment, but we can still be this kind of play what we call it a sponsor role, working with an entity like Franklin, but just harnessing PG&E's billing system because in tariff on bill, that charge would be on the PG&E side of the bill.
Sure. So PG&E could do it for their, but we could do ours on the same bill once PG&E gets their authority?
Yes.
Or do we need a separate authority for CCAs?
No, through this proceeding, we want to
Yeah.
make sure that our role, we can do what we want to do, but we still, are working with PG&E and on any kind of data needs and yes, the billing side is a big complexity because of the PG&E. But CCAs already use Calpine for on-bill financing, so that kind of billing infrastructure is already available to us.
Any other questions, comments? Is anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
No hands raised.
No. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we recommend that the executive committee recommend to the board of directors to approve the contracts to support SVCE's on-bill financing pilot.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? It passes unanimously. Thank you.
And because this is a kind of first of its kind for us, we will be bringing it to the regular agenda at the board meeting. So you'll all get to hear it again.
No, it makes total sense. It's great. It's a great new program.
And Desiree was being very modest on the tariff on bill financing. She's a key player at the CPUC on that, for that program and the proceeding.
Fantastic. Good. Okay, we will move on to item number 6, program snapshot. Overview of SVCE's data analytics program, Daisy.
Great. Hello, good afternoon, Executive Committee. Rebecca Fang, Manager of Data and Analytics here at SVCE. I'm here in the poor stead to tee up today's program snapshot. So if you recall, every once in a while, the programs team will bring an informational update on one of our programs to this meeting. So today's topic will be DAISY, which is SVCE's data analytics platform. Over the years, we've built up DAISY to be our centralized repository of data. It's particularly on the demand side. It served several key use cases. So to name a few, targeted marketing, revenue modeling, load forecasting, and program evaluation. So it's really enabled more timely data-driven decision-making across the organization, as well as enabled large-scale data analytics across our teams. And with that, I will pass it on to Sangeeta Kumar, who is our DAISY lead, to talk to you about DAISY.
Thank you.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all this afternoon. Thanks for the tee up there, Rebecca. I'm especially excited to talk about this today because our contract renewal for the vendor that helps us manage this tool is coming up at the August board meeting. So this is a nice little preview for you all. Okay, so DAISY, while it's a flower, it's also data analytics and SVCE territory. It's our internal data analytics platform hosted in Google Cloud Platform. And like Rebecca said, it contains a lot of our key data sets to support a lot of different functions across different teams at SVCE to help with marketing, communications, program evaluation, a lot of the modeling work that you saw, for example, for the income graduated fixed cost analysis is all using data from DAISY. So at a high level, this is the type of data that we have within our warehouse. It kind of answers 4 overarching questions of who are our SVC customers, so their customer attribute information, are they, like, how do they interact with our email marketing? Are they participating in our programs? What rates are they on? Where do they live? What types of current decarbonization trends exist within our SVC territory can be answered with interconnection data, so solar and storage penetration, vehicle registration to see how many zero emission vehicles we have in our service territory. Obviously, how do our customers consume energy? So we have intervaled gas and electricity data, and then kind of overall what our load looks like. So all this data is aggregated and cleaned in a way that we can easily merge it with each other into our data warehouse. And in this data warehouse, we are then able to create these core dashboards, as we call them, that all SVCE staff can interact with, that synthesize some of these high-level questions that we want to answer for our service territory. And more recently, we're working on trying to connect it with our new program portfolio tool within Salesforce. So one example that I'm going to talk about is one of our dashboards looks at load profiles by customer class, jurisdiction, and rate. So I brought in an example of looking at 2023 residential load shapes. And so as you can see, we kind of have a duck curve with our residential customers here. And we're peaking a lot during like the 4 to 8 p.m. side when the sun is going down, especially. Oh yeah, back one. So we can also see this data by jurisdiction and by rate, and you can see that, for example, the orange jurisdiction potentially has more solar customers and solar production, which is why there's a larger belly during the sun hours of the day. And then we can also see this by month and by season. And so as you can see, the winter season produces the least amount of solar, which is why it has a higher net energy consumption in comparison to the other seasons. So one interesting question that I think that this can answer is, as we're considering talking about how we're trying to decarbonize our service territory and electrify a lot of these different types of technologies, we want to know how well are our customers responding to the various rate schedules that we have, and are they actually responding to the peak periods within their rates? So I'm going to show you a little comparison between 4 of these different rates. So you have the E1, which is the tiered rate plan. There's no difference in charge regardless of time of day. And then you have ETOUC, which is one of the major rates that customers have within our service territory, and it considers an off-peak period, which is represented by the green as part of the graph, and then in orange is the peak period. So you can see, even though most of our customers are on ETOUC, they're all ramping up in this 4 to 8 p.m. time, which is technically the most expensive time for them to be actually consuming electricity. And that's when you can also see that represented across all our residential customers. But now, as we're thinking more about a lot of these electrifying, electric-based technologies that we use in terms of heat pump water heaters, heat pump HVACs, and EVs, we can look at some of these rates that take advantage of the off-peak times. Okay, hold on. There you go. Okay. EV2A, which is the home charging rate schedule, you can see also introduces a partial peak period. But interestingly, all of these customers are actually having the highest amount of energy usage during the off-peak time. So they are responding to this off-peak charge. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag in me controlling Andrea's slides. ELEC, which is the electric home rate that we've been doing a lot of analysis on, similarly is showing that there is a larger peak during the off-peak times, but you also see more of a ramp up during the 4 to 8 p.m. time. So it is peaking a little bit more than EV2A. But this is just an example of how we can actually use some of these dashboards that SVC staff has access to answer some of these different questions. We have other dashboards that look at how many customers are leaving and entering our service territory, and vehicle trends within our service territory, and the types of buildings and their vintage. And we're hoping to eventually do ones about our program participants as well. And with that, I'm happy to address any of the questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Vice Chair?
I don't have questions. These are more comments. Sangeeta, that's just amazing. I really am excited. If you could go back to slide 3 or 4, that would be great. And I have been dealing with my own carbon footprint, not footprint, my electric carbon. And no, go to the next one, please. This one. So I'm trying to get to the e-elect rate, but I can't because I have solar and storage. But when I realized that I was charging my cars between 12 a.m. or 12:15, 12:30 a.m. and 4 a.m., I'm like, this is just so wrong. That's all brown electricity, if you will, right? And so I moved it because in the green under e-elect or EV2A, you're paying the same price later in the day. So when our solar comes on stream, that's when I want to start charging my car. And then I'm charging my batteries between 11 and 2:30 p.m. And then I'm discharging them starting at 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. And it's just, I'm trying to get as much as I can in the low carbon period and low rates and the least amount of draw from the grid during the 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. But it would also be interesting to see some of these and do some I don't know if it's programs or advertising or some type of awareness to say to people, hey, don't have your car charging at this time. And I know we've got different, with I can't remember the name of the grid shift, but so many people don't use that because, frankly, if they have a Tesla, that you just plug it in and away you go. And it's not anyways. But this, to me, I think we can start to move the needle a bit. And the other thing is that really gets me going is we need to have electric rates that set by the CPUC on a pilot basis at least. And if we have some data to show what we could do with that, and through this we can, let's drop those rates during up until 3 o'clock, because we're curtailing energy then, Anyway, sorry, this is very exciting. I commend you.
So, I don't have as much electric stuff being charged as this guy does, so I don't have practical. But my simple question is the vertical axis the same in each of these graphs, so you could overlay them and compare them, or is it not?
They are the same. We just removed the actual values and magnitude of it. We wanted the focus to be on the actual shape.
Right, okay, so that is rates. And it's okay, and it's the same exact, so I can compare EV2A to ELEC directly, visually. Okay, thank you, that's all I wanted to.
No questions for me? Thank you. No, it's really exciting to see this data, and it'll be interesting to hear how we continue to use it and make it available to, conceivably the board also. Is there any remote speakers planning to speak on this item? No. Okay. Any final comments?
So I think I have, so how would this grid shift work off this data, and how does that differ? I mean, because I have a friend with a Tesla who says, I don't need grid shift. Tesla, right, or whatever, but so is a Rebecca question. Yeah, so is this is real data in slide 4, and is grid shift using this to help people charge in the lowest rates, or what, have we not utilized it in a real world sort of app setting yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the data that Sangeeta showed here is household level. So it's inclusive of EV charging appliances and everything in the home. Through GridShift, we're connected to the vehicle, mostly telematically, meaning we can see their EV charging profile separately from their household level data. So we actually have used that GridShift charging data in conjunction with the home level data to do some evaluation of the program impacts, both from an emissions and a load shifting perspective. And so actually for the GridShift pilot, we had released an EMMV report that a third party conducted for us using both of these data sets to kind of see, okay, what impact did the managed charging app actually have on people's usage, both before the program and after the program.
Okay, very interesting. So actually GridShift is using even more finite data to make its decisions about charging. Is that a correct way to say that?
Yeah, I would say so. So there are a couple of inputs. One is just the user input of when they want their car to be ready by. So that's the main one. The other is the tariff that they're on, so we can see when their peak, off-peak, and partial peak periods are, and we always try to shift into the off-peak periods. And then there's a secondary optimization within the off-peak period for the lowest carbon emission hours. And so we go to KISO for that data. So there's kind of a hierarchy of optimization that we use for GridShift.
All right, thank you. Just was curious about real world application.
Thank you. Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation. We'll move on to committee and staff remarks. Any remarks, general remarks?
We are taking a recess the month of July, so we have an executive committee meeting and no board meeting. All of them in July.
Lucky you. We actually had 4 weeks off from a city standpoint, and now we're hiring our city manager. So all of a sudden we've added 3 meetings spread out July. Yeah.
We'll get a new city manager that will.
And I wanted to invite everybody to our July 4th event again next Thursday at Baylands Park. So that will be the drone show. So as opposed to fireworks, that'll, free parking starting at 6:30, and then music for the next 2 hours, and then the drone show around 9:15. So if you're in town, if you want to, and I've never been out there, conceivably you might be able to see the fireworks at Great America and Shoreline from Baylands. So we'll see.
I'll make a comment, and Karen had left the room before I was able to compliment her, but I thought the staff, being Karen, Jessima, and Sangeeta, that was great presentations with lots of analytics in there and very well thought out. So my compliments to staff. That was really, really good.
If that's a motion, I second it, because I wanted to say the same thing. Exactly the same observation. She had said out of the room.
Any other comments? No? We will adjourn the meeting at 2:54 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Thanks again for being flexible with the time, allowing me to do my other events. Have a fun July.
Oh, yes.